all have different upbringings. We all come from different places in our lives, and that's what makes us unique. Today on this episode of Roundtable, we have 3 young ladies who come from different backgrounds who want to talk about how their dating life has been impacted by their upbringings and what they've learned throughout the way. So guys, stay tuned, and I hope you guys enjoy the Roundtable. Thank you, guys. How has your upbringing influenced your dating life? In what ways has your upbringing influenced your dating life? Everything you guys have been through since you were young, whether it's your parents, whether it's boyfriend or girlfriend you have, whether it's a trauma that you went through in your life, how do you think that has made you to be not the woman that you are, but to have the views and outlooks on how you view dating and how you go about dating in your life?
Who wants to start? I can start. So I grew up, my parents are still married, so I think that has definitely influenced how I view relationships and how I view marriage. It was great being brought up in a two-parent household. I have friends who weren't, so I'm very grateful and appreciative. My dad's really great, and he's treated me really well and my mom really well, so I think he's been very influential in the type of man that I'm looking for. I know that I know what not to put up with, what I deserve. So I think that's
And you've seen him loving and you've seen him caring for her, so that's
Yeah.
kind of like what you want from what your dad is.
And they're like best friends. They still hold hands when they walk down the street. They're just so cute. So I know I want that.
Well, I have kind of an opposite type of situation. I think what shaped it for me was the fact that my parents were immigrants. My mom came from Peru when she was around 21, but she had my brother when she was 16. So being in this country alone, I guess seeing her raise us on her own. My dad, they were divorced, but he was kind of around. But I guess just seeing her fear of, I don't want you to get pregnant when you're 16, that was like my guiding factor through life. So I remember, in high school, I developed early. And I had a lot of unwanted male attention, and my mom was freaking out all the time. So it was always like, they're predators, get away, oh my God. And I was like, I just want to have friends. And she didn't let me have friends. I mean, at school I had my friends. But there was so much fear around relationships and men that I realized, like, okay, I can't even have a boyfriend when everybody else is having a boyfriend. I never had, I guess, a positive male role model to look to. My brother, he was a lot older, but he was in a gang. He had a lot of, his friends around. So when I was younger, I kind of saw that only. I was like, oh, okay, these are cool people. And so then as I got older, I realized that was still my type. I knew inside this is not okay, and it's probably not going to work out. But there was a part of me that still couldn't break that pattern.
Right, because it's been for so long, that's what you're used to.
Exactly, that's what I was used to. Yeah. And I had no self-awareness. Couldn't tell myself okay, Kristen, this doesn't feel good. It was I know it doesn't feel good, but I'm going to continue it. And so when I was 18, my mom moved away. She went to Indiana to do a PhD program in Notre Dame, and so that was the first time where I was like, oh, I'm kind of on my own. Yeah, I was at UC Berkeley, and I was like, okay, this is my moment. So having independence for the first time, I think that it didn't go the way that it should have.
Because maybe you had to learn things on your own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how we're asking the question of how your specific upbringing influences your dating life, but in some kind of way, your parents' situations determines how they present that to you.
Exactly.
And then again, that determines how it goes.
Well, in a way, it could be a trickle-down effect. It could be what your parents have went through, or what their upbringing, and is basically passed on, and something that now you're going through is what your parents went through. So it just keeps trickling down. So I mean, never be however your situation is, never let it define your.
I think you learn that later in life
Right.
after you have the experiences.
Right.
Because I had to have a lot of experiences, to realize, hey, you know what? Let me stop for a second, kind of look inside and realize what is it that I want. Because unlike you, and I look at your situation and I admire it, I feel like there are there are not that many situations you see like that anymore. I mean, having both parents together, having a functional situation to look up to, I didn't have that. And then, you know, when you go through your different experiences of trying to date, trying to feel out what men are like, because you really don't know, then you go through some bad things.
Especially when you don't know that male figure, you're searching for that male figure in men as well.
Exactly.
So, definitely.
Yeah.
And as much as I think that, like, at least for me, like, as much as I think that my perception of my father has a lot to do with, like, the guys that I am interested in, it's more, I think, like, talks about, like, a more, like, private relationship with your parents. So, like, if you're very close with your parents, like, I am fortunate enough to be close with both of them, I value very highly even bringing somebody to, like, even just meet them. And so, you know, it's funny because now that I'm getting older, you know, my dad's always like, you know, when are you going to bring a guy home? And I'm like, hey, you should be happy that you've only really met like a couple guys, you know, because that just shows that I value and I respect my parents so much that, like, I don't want to, you know, excuse my language, but I don't want to fuck around and bring someone home that I'm going to be, like, ashamed of down the road. And, you know, same as you, like, my parents have been together for over 25 years. My grandparents were together for over 50 years. So it's like those core relationships in my life, like, make me aspire to want to have them. You know, I have friends in my life that will call me, like, a romantic and whatnot. But it's like, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. That's because I have such positive, like, influences. And that's the way I look at my dating life. And, like, obviously you have to alter it to, like, this generation because it's not, like, you know, The Notebook and all these movies that you see. But it's like, what's wrong with wanting those type of things? And what's wrong with, like, having those goals? Because that's a direct reflection of, like, our parents, our upbringing, the standards that they set for us as women, as human beings. Like, so yeah, it's definitely like a twofold type of thing.
So would you say, like, because my parents have been together for like 35 years as well, but we're talking about how that's what we want and everything like that, but have we always had that? Like, in every relationship we went through, like, I'm single, but I look for something in my parents, but I always haven't chose that type of woman. Like,
But I think maybe because your parents are so, like, you know, like, so up here to you,
Right.
at least the way I look at it is, like, guys that I've dated or, like, you know, hung out with in the past that were, like, kind of maybe bad for me and stuff.
Right.
It was more like a curiosity, like, you know, like, oh, my dad, like, he's an amazing man, sure. But does that mean I'm not curious to maybe date, like,
Right.
the stereotypical, like,
and that can
fuck
happen.
boy, so to speak? I don't know. Like, you're curious to see, you know, what's the hype all about?
Yeah.
But then it's like you said, that you're not going to bring them home.
And that's the thing, is that it's like, okay, you know how to decipher through the guys that you would bring home and the guys that you would just...
But I'm saying, like, in terms of, like, the guys that you are dating or the guys that you are talking to, like, so what is, so your interest in them is basically what? Would it be like an attraction if they're not measuring up to the level of your father or what you look for in a man? Like, what
I
is
think for me personally, since I didn't really have my dad around, right now at 28 years old, after all the experiences, I think about, I guess, what society, what's normal for
Right.
society, and then I think about what's normal for me.
Right.
So
That's big.
yeah, so I think about it in a way as like, okay, can I bring this person to my job, like a
Right.
Christmas party?
Right.
Will they represent me in the right way?
Right.
Not you, not you, not you. So then you're kind of like, why am I even doing this? But I feel like when I look back at my history and the people that I've dated, I can honestly say that at the time, I really thought that I was making the best decision. I didn't go into it like, oh, you're a fuckboy, yay. It was more like, I think you might be great. You're 6'6", and I
There we
just
go.
really think that this could work. I think that you might go to the NBA one, like I really did when I was 21 to 24. I was like, yes, my life. But I also realized I didn't have the self-esteem.
Right.
I think when you look at that part, it was like, you know, my mom was like, Kristen, you're so pretty, why? And I'm like, really? You think that? Like, I didn't believe it. So I was looking for outside factors to validate me.
Right.
And I realized that, I mean, I was single for like 5 years. So, you know, I talked to people, but I had to isolate myself and really get to a point where I was like, who am I? Because if I don't love myself, I can't expect anybody else to. And my mom and I are really close, but she didn't want me to go through what she went through. And I feel like at this point, I guess I want to make her proud. I want to be able to be the one where it's like, hey, you came to this country and you sacrificed a lot, and I'm not gonna get involved with somebody who's gonna treat me this way, because I know what you went through. I know how my dad unfortunately treated her and her other relationships, and so for me, I feel like, okay, I'm at a point where I have my life together. I have a good job. I'm independent. I help my mom. So why am I going to bring somebody around who's going to bring me down? And I think you get to a point where you start to just discern, and you're around certain people, and even if you know that they're the same type of people that you used to be around, you have to make that decision where you're like, okay, is this really good for me right now? You're attractive, whatever it is. But I just try to gauge, honestly, the energy of the person, what they're doing, how they make me feel. But then at the end of the day, I'm like, I have to be okay with myself.
So that's kind of something I was thinking about as you were saying that, like, even though we have all these factors of our upbringing, of how we want to, the person we want to be with based on what we've learned from our parents, like at what point or what do you necessarily have to go through personally for those things to kind of register, like, you know what, that person isn't good for me because I've seen how I was raised. I've seen what my mom went through. I've seen how my parents got through something. Like, is there, because it might be different for women compared to us guys, but what is it that you need to see to kind of kick those things in the drive? Like, okay, my parents raised me this way. I don't need to go this direction.
Well, it depends how long you date, because you start to go through different experiences the longer you're together. So I think, at least from my dating history, like, I also go in with the purest of intentions, and I think, like, this is going to work, or else I'm not going to put my time into it, because I feel like my time is really valuable. So I'm not going to give my time to anybody if I don't think there's a future. However, once you go through different situations and you start to see, okay, I didn't like how you reacted to that, I didn't like how you acted to that situation, you talk about it, you communicate, and if it changes, great, and if not, like, I'm not trying to change anybody. You have to be authentic to yourself in order to be happy and to give your true self to me and be in a healthy relationship. So I'm not going to go in with the intent of changing somebody. But it just takes time to experience it.
But you know what's interesting is my dad, so I'm only 25, and so my dad, he told me, a couple months ago something that kind of surprised me, because, we talked about how, our parents have these standards that they set for us, but my dad, he asked me, and it was so weird, he was like, do you ever think that, like, you have too many standards? Like, we know that we raised you right to have a lot of standards, but, like, we don't want you to basically, like, kind of pass on every guy that doesn't meet, like, A to Z, and it's like, obviously you kind of have to adjust your standards a bit, but it was interesting because to come from, like, my actual father's mouth, like, to say, like, well, maybe you should give, like, someone a chance even if they don't kind of match up, like, on paper, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's how I think that in the last couple of years, like, how I think Danny had asked, like, what kind of do you have to see? It's like, you don't really have to see anything. Obviously, there's an initial attraction, you hit it off well, but it's like, after a while, like how you had said, like, how does he make me feel? Like, can I bring him around my friends and they like him? The job thing is crucial too. Like, do I want to bring him to a job function and he's not going to, like, embarrass me, Like, and I'm sure that men feel the same way about women. So it's like, I think that you'll never really have, like, a recipe for what you're looking for.
I think it's a growth thing,
Yeah.
like, and the more experiences that you go through, because I mean, we all have this standard in how like our upbringing and how our parents have treated someone or somebody else, like figures in our life. But I think it's just like a growth thing. As for me, a lot of people don't know, I was arrested at probably 21 over a relationship. So when I went through that, it was kind of like, well, like, my family was involved, everybody was involved. It was like, wow. So I took a step back and I had to grow. Like, yeah, it wasn't my fault, but I had to grow from, like, evolving as a person and realize, like, that relationship was cancerous from the jump, but I continued because of something that I wasn't aware of, or that not being smart, or maybe not even being confident in myself, and I continued. And it took something that severe, like that breaking point, for me to be like, okay, this isn't what I need, like, this isn't. Like,
That's the tough thing. I feel like
Yeah.
when you experience such toxic relationships and you keep doing it to
Right.
yourself, you're like, why do I keep
Right.
doing this? And then you think, is it my traumas? Is it PTSD? Did my mom do something? Did something happen to me? And it's like, okay, you can't live your life based on your trauma, so you have to move forward at some point. And I guess in relation to that, it just feels like we do so much thinking about, okay, why am I with this person? Why did I make the decision to go with this toxic person? And for myself, I realized like it was a breaking point for me,
Right.
like a really
That's
low
what it
point,
is. Yeah.
where I realized if I keep doing this to myself, the repercussions could be dire. So I guess it just took, like I said earlier, the isolation thing. But tell me if you guys think about this ever. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, you go through these toxic relationships, right? And you're like, that's bad, I shouldn't do it. And then you meet someone nice on paper and nice, and everyone's like, oh, they're nice, but you're like, this is so boring. And then my
Yeah.
mom is like, Kristen, but why can't you give them a chance? You gave this person a chance. Are you kidding me? This is like the devil. But you don't give this person a chance, and I'm like, but Ma, you don't get it.
Yeah.
You don't understand. Like, this other person, he was nice, and she's like, tell me what nice is. And I'm like, well, sometimes he took me out to eat. That shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah.
It should be like, hey, look, this other guy's super respectful. He's caring. But for me, I'm like, I'm not used to that, and that's
Right.
boring.
Yeah.
And it sucks because I'm like, will I ever get out of that phase? So then I isolate myself some more, and I'm like, well, let me meet the next person. Like, maybe they'll be okay. Like, I feel like even thinking about a guy actually taking me on a date, I'm like, has that really even happened? It's more like, hey, want to kick it? And I'm like, is that normal? Like, that must be normal,
Right.
right? Because I don't know any better.
And then it becomes a comfort zone.
Exactly. Then you
it
get
becomes
into
a
a comfort
comfort
zone.
And then
that's the
yes,
worst
and that's the
part.
worst part. And the biggest thing, like, about the comfort zone is it's a comfort zone.
So until you get uncomfortable,
Until you get
won't make a
uncomfortable.
change.
Exactly.
And that's the hardest part
Yeah.
for me personally. I'm like, I know that guy's nice, but then I'm like,
Because it happens, like, to men, women. Like, I was dating a woman, and I used to text her every day and say, good morning. Hope you have a good day. After a few weeks, it was like, she was like, why are you texting me every morning? Like, what do you want? And I was like, what?
oh my goodness.
And then I was like, I'm just texting you to just say good morning, hope you have a good day. And
She
she's
probably
like,
thought you were hella thirsty.
right,
and
right, like, but it was like, but she was like, what are you trying to pull? And I was like, I'm not trying to pull nothing. I'm just texting you every day. And her reason, I was like, so you're telling me you're not used to guys being nice to you? And she's like, to be honest with you, no. Like, I don't even know how this feels. Like, I don't even know how to go about this. And I was like, okay, I respect that. But at that point, I was at a different level in my life than she was, and I wasn't gonna just pull her, drag her with me. So I was like, okay, you fix yourself first. I'll go on about my way. And then, like, she, like, a month later, text me trying to see what's up, like, I'm ready type thing, but it just was dead and gone. So I think it's just a point in people's life, and that's funny that you said that, because it's definitely getting uncomfortable with your comfort. So.
And it's like you said too earlier about the healthy relationship thing. Like, when you realize what a healthy relationship is, then you can actually strive for it.
Right.
When you don't know, you're kind of like, I'll be doing the same thing, getting the same outcome. It's never going to work.
Right.
But maybe this person's going to be okay. But you date the same person basically in a different shell
Right.
every time. So.
Well, and I think that, like, for, like, even myself and, like, a lot of my close girlfriends, one of the things that, like, is the hardest thing about growing, like, just individually as a woman is that, like, you have to kind of come to terms with that. Yeah, the guy might not be doing what he needs to be doing, but you're self-sabotaging. Like, how you said the girls, like, what do you want? Like,
Right.
if you're not used to, like, being with good men, when a good man comes along, you're like, you're lying, you're too good. And it's like, you self-sabotage it.
Yeah.
Because he's like, what do you mean? Like, and we always talk about, like, don't let the past kind of hinder the future, but it's like, you can't help it. Because it's like, especially, I know a lot of girls that, like, have met those nice guys, and unfortunately, it's turned out that they were bad. So then they're like, oh no, like, I've even met a nice guy, and no, it's gonna go bad. And then the whole time, even like a year after they're dating, they're still waiting. The girl's waiting for the guy to do something. And that's not how it should be.
Yeah.
But that's how, like, we've kind of, changed our mindset. And it's unfortunate. And it's not successful for men or women, like, to be in a successful relationship if everyone's basically self-doubting and self-sabotaging it.
I kind of feel like, I guess, the influence that your upbringing has a major part. Being self-aware has a major part. It kind of goes hand in hand. You know
But
what I mean?
your upbringing is the root, and it starts with the root, and you continue to grow. Like anything else, you look at the root, and you continue to grow up, and you continue to blossom, and you continue to change your circumstances and how you are as a person. But continue to keep improving as young ladies. You guys are all great women, and thank you guys for talking to us. I appreciate it.